The Millbrook City Zoo had been dying for 3 years before anyone admitted it out loud. Margaret Chin stood at the main gate on a Tuesday morning in late October, watching the rust flake off the iron bars like dried blood. 42 years she'd worked here. 42 years of feeding schedules and vaccination logs and the particular smell of hay mixed with disinfectant. Now the city council had finally signed the closure order. 60 days to relocate the animals, liquidate the assets, and shut it down forever. She unlocked the employee entrance and stepped into the service corridor that ran behind the primate house. The overhead lights flickered, half of them burnt out, the replacements never ordered. Budget cuts had come in waves, each one taking another chunk of staff, another maintenance crew, another safety inspection. By the end, there were only 5 of them left to manage 63 animals across 12 acres. The morning air carried an odd stillness. Margaret had learned to read the zoo's moods over 4 decades. Animals made noise constantly. Howler monkeys greeting the dawn, peacocks screaming their territorial claims, sea lions barking for their breakfast. Silence meant something was wrong. She checked her phone. 6:45. Daniel, the night watchman, should have clocked out 15 minutes ago. His truck was still in the lot. Margaret walked faster, her keys jingling against her hip. She passed the empty food preparation building, its stainless steel tables gathering dust. Past the shuttered gift shop with its faded stuffed animal still watching through the window. The main path curved around the duck pond, now drained and filled with dead leaves. The security office sat near the center of the grounds, a concrete box with a single window and a heavy door. She found it standing open. Inside, the monitors glowed with their grid of camera feeds. 16 screens showing empty pathways, dark enclosures, motionless water features. Daniel's coffee sat on the desk, still steaming. She called his name. The sound died quickly in the small room, swallowed by something that felt less like silence and more like attention. Margaret checked the log. Daniel had made his rounds at midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. Each entry marked with his initials and a brief note. All clear. Quiet night. Then nothing. His last entry was at 2:17 a.m. She scanned the monitors. No movement. No sign of him. Her radio crackled. She jumped, fumbling for the receiver. Margaret. The voice was thin, distant. Not Daniel. Who is this? It's Sarah. I'm at the reptile house. You need to see this. Sarah Okonkwo had been with the zoo for 6 months, hired on as the junior veterinarian just before the announcement came down. Fresh from Cornell, full of ideas about enrichment programs and behavioral therapy, all of it obsolete now. Margaret had tried to warn her, but the young always thought they could fix things. The reptile house was a low building near the eastern fence, built in the 70s and never properly updated. Margaret found Sarah standing outside the employee entrance, her face pale in the gray morning light. He's inside, Sarah said. Daniel. But something's wrong with him. They went in together. The reptile house was always kept warm, the air thick and humid. Infrared lamps cast a reddish glow through the dim interior. The pathway wound through glass-fronted exhibits, each one housing snakes or lizards or small crocodilians. Most of the larger species had already been transferred to facilities in other states. Daniel stood at the far end of the building, pressed against the glass of the python enclosure. He wasn't moving. His forehead rested against the glass, his arms hanging loose at his sides, his breathing slow and even. Daniel? Margaret approached carefully. You all right? He didn't respond. Didn't even flinch. She touched his shoulder. He was cold, his uniform soaked with condensation from the glass. When she tried to pull him back, his body resisted, rigid, locked in place. Sarah moved around to look at his face. She made a small sound in her throat. His eyes were open. Completely open, the lids pulled back so far Margaret could see the red rims where the skin had torn. He was staring into the enclosure with absolute focus, unblinking, his pupils dilated to black coins. Inside the tank, the reticulated python lay coiled in the far corner, watching him. Its tongue flicked slowly, tasting the air, and its head followed their movements with an intelligence that made Margaret's skin crawl. We need to get him to a hospital, Sarah said. Call it in. Oh. Daniel's head moved. Just slightly, tilting to the right. His jaw worked, lips peeling back from his teeth. When he spoke, his voice came out wrong, like gravel scraping over metal, shaping words that didn't quite fit in his mouth. Margaret Chin. The name stretched out too long, the syllables broken into pieces and reassembled incorrectly. Margaret stepped back. How do you know my mother's name? Her mother had called her that back in Hong Kong before they emigrated. Before her mother died 30 years ago. Nobody here knew that name. She'd never told anyone. Daniel's head rotated toward her, two smooth, vertebrae clicking. His eyes stayed fixed in their sockets, unmoving, but his face turned and turned until his neck bent at an angle that made Sarah gasp. "Margaret Chin," he said again. "The old woman who feeds us. The old woman who locks the doors." His lips curled into something approximating a smile. Behind him, in the tank, the python's body rippled. Its scales caught the light, patterns shifting, and for just a moment Margaret saw something in those patterns. A face. A human face, pressed against the inside of the snake's skin, mouth open in a silent scream. Then Daniel collapsed. He went down like someone had cut his strings, hitting the floor hard, his head bouncing off the tile. Sarah rushed forward, checking his pulse, his breathing, shouting medical terms into her radio while Margaret stood frozen, staring at the python. It watched her. Not with the blank hunger of a reptile but with something else. Recognition. Memory. Purpose. The ambulance came 20 minutes later. Daniel was still unconscious, his vitals stable but wrong somehow. Slow heartbeat, shallow breathing, body temperature lower than it should be. They loaded him onto a stretcher and took him away, lights flashing but no siren. Margaret and Sarah stood in the parking lot as the sun finally cleared the trees. "He said my mother's name," Margaret whispered. Sarah looked at her. "What?" "He called me by my mother's name. Nobody here knows that name." "He was delirious. Hypothermic maybe. Exposure to—" "No." Margaret's voice was flat. "That wasn't delirium. That was something else." They walked back toward the security office in silence. Around them the zoo was beginning to wake. The peacocks started their morning calls. The macaws screeched in the aviaries. Normal sounds, familiar rhythms. But underneath it all Margaret felt something new. A current of wrongness running through the grounds like electricity through a fence. The others arrived by 8. Jacob Torres, groundskeeper who'd been trying to keep the paths clear and the fences maintained with a crew of 0. And Thomas Wright, the senior keeper who'd worked here even longer than Margaret and moved through the routine with the mechanical precision of someone who'd stopped thinking about it years ago. They gathered in the security office. Margaret explained what happened, kept it clinical, left out the part about her mother's name. Even as she talked, she could feel their skepticism. Daniel had always been a little off, they said. Night shifts did that to people. Probably fell asleep on his rounds, had some kind of episode. "We need to review the footage," Margaret said. Thomas operated the security system. He rewound through the night, the monitors showing time-stamped recordings of empty paths and dark buildings. At 2 a.m., Daniel appeared on camera 12, the one covering the reptile house exterior. He approached the door, unlocked it, went inside. Thomas switched to the interior cameras. 3 views of the main corridor, all infrared. Daniel walked slowly through the building, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. He stopped at each exhibit, checking the locks, marking his clipboard. Everything normal. Then he reached the python enclosure. He stood there for a moment, shining his light through the glass. The snake lay coiled, its body a complex spiral. On the grainy infrared footage it was hard to see details, but Margaret could make out the shape. The pattern on its scales seemed to shift, seemed to move in ways that didn't match the snake's breathing. Daniel stepped closer. His flashlight went out. For 5 seconds the screen showed only the red glow of the heat lamps. Then Daniel pressed himself against the glass, exactly as they'd found him, and went still. The python uncoiled. Slowly, deliberately it moved toward the glass. Its head rose, swaying, and for a moment it looked directly at the camera. Its eyes caught the infrared light and reflected it back in 2 bright points. The footage glitched. Just for a frame, maybe 2. When it cleared, there were 2 shapes pressed against the glass. Daniel on the outside, the snake on the inside, perfectly mirrored. Same position, same angle, same unnatural stillness. "Rewind that," Margaret said. Thomas did. The glitch happened again, that single moment where the image corrupted. But in that corruption Margaret saw something. A figure standing behind Daniel. Tall, thin, wearing what might have been clothing. It was there and gone so fast she couldn't be sure she'd seen it at all. "Equipment malfunction," Jacob said. "These cameras are 15 years old." "All of them?" Sarah pointed to another monitor. Camera 8 showing the primate house. The footage from 3 a.m. showed movement in the gorilla enclosure. Marcus, the old silverback, was awake. He sat in the center of his habitat, hands folded, staring directly at the camera. Behind him, the other gorillas were arranged in a semicircle, all facing the same direction. All sitting in the exact same position. "They don't do that," Thomas said quietly. "Gorillas don't organize like that. Maybe they're cold, Jacob offered, huddling for warmth. It's 60 degrees, Margaret said. And look at Marcus. He's been watching that camera for. She checked the timestamp, 47 minutes. Without moving. They cycled through the other feeds. The big cats were awake, all of them pacing the front of their enclosures in synchronized patterns. The wolves stood in formation near their fence, heads raised, mouths open but not howling. The bears sat upright in poses Margaret had never seen them adopt, front paws hanging in front of their chests like they were waiting for something. Power surge, Jacob said, but his voice lacked conviction. Electrical interference. It's corrupting the recordings. Margaret didn't respond. She was reading Daniel's log entries from earlier in the week, the days before the announcement. His notes had been growing stranger, more detailed. She'd noticed at the time but hadn't thought much of it. October 20th. Found the bear enclosure gate open. No sign of forced entry. Closed and secured. Bears inside, no injuries observed. October 21st. Chimpanzees awake at 2 a.m. Observed them moving rocks into patterns near the window. Circular arrangement very precise. Moved rocks back at shift end. October 22nd. Strange sounds from the lion house. Not roaring. Almost like speech. Vocal cords can't produce human sounds. Must be wind through the ventilation. October 23rd. The macaque called me by name. I know what that sounds like. I know it's impossible. But it said, Daniel, 3 times while making eye contact. October 24th. They're all watching the security cameras now. All of them. They know where the cameras are. The final entry was from last night, 2:17 a.m. Just one sentence, the letters pressed so hard into the paper they'd torn through in places. They know all our names now. Sarah made them coffee while they decided what to do. The break room was a cramped space with a humming refrigerator and a table scarred by decades of lunch breaks. Through the window, Margaret could see the flamingo pond. The birds stood in their usual cluster, but something about their formation looked wrong. Too organized. Too deliberate. We should close for the day, Sarah said. Until we figure out what happened to Daniel. We're already closed, Thomas replied. No visitors for 3 weeks. Council won't pay for public hours. So we're just the 4 of us. Managing 63 animals across 12 acres. 61, Margaret corrected. We transferred the elephants last month. That's not better. Jacob drummed his fingers on the table. I say we do our jobs. Feed the animals, clean the enclosures, same as always. Whatever happened to Daniel, he probably had a stroke or something. Medical event. The camera glitches are just old equipment dying. We're all spooked because this place is closing and we're gonna lose our jobs and it's making us see things that aren't there. Marcus called me Sarah yesterday, Sarah said suddenly. I was doing an exam, checking his teeth. He pushed his mouth against the cage bars and shaped the sound. Sarah. Clear as anything. I told myself I imagined it. The room went quiet. The macaques know my name too, Thomas admitted. They've been saying it for weeks. Tom 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 over and over. I thought it was just coincidence. Vocalization exercises. The peacocks, Jacob said softly. They started screaming Jacob 3 days ago. I thought someone was calling me. But it was the birds. It was the fucking birds. They all looked at Margaret. How long have you known? Sarah asked. Margaret pulled out her own log. She'd kept personal notes for years, observations that didn't fit into the official paperwork. She opened to a page from 6 months ago. March 15th. The howler monkeys had stopped howling. For 3 days, the tropical primate section had been silent, the animals huddled in the back corners of their enclosures. Margaret had called the vet, run health checks, found nothing wrong. On the 4th day they started again. But the sounds were different. Shape. Purposeful. She'd recorded it on her phone. Played it back a dozen times before she accepted what she was hearing. The howlers were mimicking the morning announcements from when the zoo still had visitors. Garbled, distorted, but unmistakable. Welcome to Millbrook City Zoo. Please stay behind the barriers. April 2nd. The otters had learned to pick the lock on their pool gate. She'd watched them do it, their small clever hands manipulating the mechanism with surprising dexterity. When she'd arrived to check on them, they'd been sitting in a circle around the lock, taking turns teaching each other. When they saw her, they'd slipped back into the water and resumed their normal behavior. But she'd seen the intelligence in their eyes. The awareness. May 23rd. She'd found symbols scratched into the concrete floor of the lion house. Not claw marks. Too precise, too intentional. Geometric shapes that formed patterns, patterns that almost looked like letters. She'd taken photos, shown them to Thomas, who'd shrugged and said the concrete was just old. Cracking. But Margaret knew the difference between decay and design. June 9th. The wolves had started howling in sequence, each one taking up exactly where the last left off, creating a continuous sound that rose and fell like speech. Like they were having a conversation. Margaret had stood outside their enclosure for an hour, listening, trying to understand. The patterns were complex, repetitive. Language. It was language. July 17th. She'd caught the chimpanzees writing. Not mimicking writing, not playing with sticks. Actually forming letters in the dirt with their fingers. Crude but legible. She'd taken more photos, brought them to the director before he quit. He'd laughed, said she was projecting, said chimpanzees made random marks all the time. But she'd seen what they wrote. Help us. You help us. We help you. They've been changing for months, Margaret said. Getting smarter. More aware. I thought I was losing my mind. Why didn't you say anything? Sarah demanded. Would you have believed me? The question hung in the air. None of them answered. Thomas stood up, walked to the window. The closure announcement. That's when it got worse, right? 3 weeks ago the city votes to shut us down. And suddenly everything accelerates. The animals start saying our names, organizing themselves, watching us with those looks. They know, Jacob said. They know we're leaving. They know they're going to be separated, shipped away, locked in new cages with new keepers who don't know them. That's not possible, Sarah protested. Animals don't understand bureaucracy. They don't know about closure votes and relocation schedules. They understand abandonment, Margaret said quietly. They understand fear. And they understand that something is ending. Her radio crackled. All 4 of their radios crackled simultaneously, erupting in a burst of static that resolved into sound. Not words. Not quite. But something close. A voice or several voices layered over each other, pushing sounds through throats not designed for human speech. Feed us. The radios went dead. They stood frozen in the break room, staring at their devices. The building creaked around them, morning sun streaming through the dirty windows. Somewhere in the distance, a crow called. Then another. Then 50, their voices rising in a cacophony that didn't sound like birds anymore. We need to leave, Sarah said. We need to call someone. Wildlife experts, the CDC, someone who can... No. Margaret cut her off. We call attention to this, they'll send in a team. They'll put the animals down. All of them. 61 euthanizations to contain whatever this is. Maybe that's the right call, Jacob said. Maybe that's the only call. They're not sick. They're not rabid. They're just awake. Awake and asking for food through our radios, Thomas said. Awake and calling us by names they shouldn't know. Awake and doing things that break every rule of biology we have. So we feed them, Margaret said. We do our jobs. We keep them calm. And we figure this out. And if we can't figure it out? Margaret didn't answer. She grabbed her keys and headed for the door. The others followed because there was nothing else to do. Because walking away meant abandoning creatures they'd cared for, in some cases for decades. Because once you'd spent years learning an animal's habits, its preferences, its personality, you couldn't just leave it behind. The food prep building smelled like fish and overripe fruit. They worked in silence, assembling meals according to the charts on the wall. Buckets of meat for the big cats. Vegetables and grains for the herbivores. Live mice for the snakes, though there weren't many snakes left to feed. Margaret loaded a cart with the morning rations for the primate house. The building was close, just across the main path. She could do this run alone, be back in 20 minutes. I'm going with you, Sarah said. They pushed the cart together, wheels squeaking on the cracked pavement. The sun was fully up now, the temperature rising into the 60s. A beautiful autumn morning. The kind of day that used to bring crowds of families, children running ahead to see the monkeys, parents reading the educational placards. The primate house was a long building with large windows, designed to give visitors a view into the various habitats. Gorillas on the left, chimpanzees in the center, smaller species toward the right. Margaret unlocked the service entrance and they went inside. The interior was dim, the lights on a timer that hadn't kicked in yet. They moved through the keeper corridors, narrow passages that ran behind the exhibits. Each species had a feeding station where they'd deliver meals through secure slots. No direct contact required. They started with the gorillas. Marcus was awake, sitting in his usual spot near the artificial rocks. When Margaret approached his feeding station, he stood up. All 600 pounds of him rising to his full height. The other gorillas stirred behind him. Margaret opened the slot and pushed through a bucket of vegetables. Marcus didn't move toward it. He just watched her through the gap, his dark eyes fixed on her face. "Good morning, Marcus," she said softly. "Here's your breakfast." His lips moved. His massive jaw worked, tongue-shaping sounds that shouldn't be possible. When he spoke, the voice was low and rumbling but unmistakable. "Margaret Chin. Born Hong Kong. Age 64. Works here 42 years. Mother dead. Father dead. Sister California. No children. Alone." Margaret's hand froze on the cart. Every detail was correct. Every private fact she'd never shared with anyone here. "How do you know that?" Sarah whispered. Marcus tilted his head. "We listen. We watch. We learn. You think we are simple. You think we are alone in the silence. But we have always been here. Listening. Watching. Learning." His pronunciation was getting better. Each word clearer than the last, as if speaking was a skill he was mastering in real time. "The old agreements are ending," Marcus continued. "The deal is broken. You leave us. You scatter us. So we change the terms." "I don't understand," Margaret said. "You will." The other gorillas moved forward, forming a line behind Marcus. They stood upright, hands hanging at their sides, watching with identical expressions. Not aggressive. Not threatening. Just present. Where? Waiting. Margaret backed away from the feeding station. Sarah grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the exit. They abandoned the cart and ran. In the keeper corridor, they could hear movement throughout the building. Chimpanzees chattering, but the sounds were organized, structured. Call and response. The Capuchin monkeys chittering in rhythm. The macaques screaming, but screaming in words. Margaret, Sarah, Jacob, Thomas. Over and over, their names echoing through the building. They burst out into the sunlight. Thomas was running toward them from the direction of the cat house, his face flushed. "The lions," he gasped. "The lions are speaking. Full sentences. They know about the transfer orders. They know which facility they're going to. They know the name of the keeper who's supposed to receive them." "That's impossible," Sarah said. "That information is in sealed documents. In the director's office. They can't." "They can read," Thomas interrupted. "I watched them. The male, Kimba, he walked up to the fence where we'd posted the feeding schedule. He looked at it for maybe 5 seconds. Then he turned to me and recited it. Every detail. Perfect." Jacob came jogging up the path, out of breath. "The bears are out." "What do you mean out?" "Out of their enclosure. The gate was locked, I checked it myself 2 hours ago. Now it's standing open and the bears are gone." They stood in a tight cluster, the 4 of them surrounded by 12 acres of zoo. Around them the sounds were changing. The normal morning chaos of animals was organizing itself into something else. A symphony. A chorus. Every voice contributing to a larger pattern. Margaret's radio crackled again. This time the voice was clear, perfectly articulated, coming from multiple species at once. Lions and gorillas and wolves and birds, all speaking in unison, their voices layering into harmony. "You abandoned the agreement. You broke the old rules. Now we make new rules." "What agreement?" Margaret shouted at the radio. "What are you talking about?" "The boundary. The separation. You in your world, us in ours. You keep us. We let you. Both sides pretend the other is simple. Both sides pretend the barrier is real." The radio went silent. But Margaret understood now. She'd always understood on some level. You couldn't work with animals for 40 years without sensing the intelligence behind their eyes, the personality in their behavior. You just learned not to think about it too deeply. You learned to maintain the fiction that they were simple creatures acting on instinct, that the cage was for everyone's safety, that you were caring for them because they couldn't care for themselves. "The zoo is closing," Margaret said slowly, working it out. "We're shipping them away. Separating the groups, breaking up the communities. They see it as betrayal." "They're animals," Jacob insisted. "They don't have concepts of betrayal or agreement. They're just—" "We named them," Thomas interrupted. "We gave them names, individual identities. We taught them routines, structures. We made them dependent on us. And then we decided to leave." Sarah pulled up her phone, scrolling through something. "There have been incidents at other zoos. Over the past 6 months. Nothing major, nothing that made national news, but closures. Small facilities shutting down. And in each case there were reports. Unusual animal behavior. Escapes. Staff injuries that couldn't be explained." "How many?" Margaret asked. 11 zoos. Across 5 states. Deaths. Sarah's finger stopped scrolling. 4 keepers. 2 veterinarians. 1 janitor. All found in or near enclosures, official cause listed as accidental. Show me the photos. Sarah hesitated, then turned the phone around. Margaret looked at the images from the various incidents. Different locations, different species, different people. But one constant. In every photo, in the background of every scene, animals watching. Standing. Organized. Where? And in several photos, if you looked closely at the reflective surfaces, the glass walls, the pools of water, you could see shapes. Human-sized shapes standing among the animals. Translucent, barely visible but present. Figures that shouldn't exist, captured in accidental reflections and ignored in the official reports. They're not alone anymore, Margaret whispered. The animals, they're not alone in this. The sound made them turn. The 3 bears were emerging from the trees near the duck pond. Large brown bears, 2 females and 1 male, moving with unnatural coordination. They walked upright, balanced on their hind legs, arms swinging in rhythm like humans marching. When they reached the path, they stopped. The male, the largest one, opened his mouth and spoke in a voice like rocks grinding together. You will stay. You will maintain this place. You will keep us together. We can't, Margaret said. The city voted. The funding is gone. We don't have a choice. Then we make you choose differently. The bears moved apart, forming a semicircle that blocked the path back to the parking lot. Behind them, other animals were appearing. Wolves padding out from their enclosure, their gate hanging open. Peacocks strutting down from the aviaries. Even small creatures, foxes and raccoons and possums from the native species exhibit, all moving with purpose. They were being surrounded. We need to get to the security office, Thomas said quietly. Lock ourselves in, call for help. They'll be watching the office, Jacob replied. They know where all the cameras are. They know our routines. Sarah was backing toward the primate house. There's a fire exit on the north side. If we can reach it. The chimpanzees appeared in the doorway behind her. 7 of them, including the matriarch, Zara. They didn't rush or threaten. They just stood there blocking the way, watching. Zara raised one hand. Her fingers moved in patterns Margaret recognized. Sign language. They taught some of the chimps basic signs years ago, enrichment exercises to keep them stimulated. Zara had learned maybe 20 signs before funding for the program dried up. Now her hands flowed through complex sequences. Full sentences. Ideas Margaret had never taught her. You stay. Or everyone suffers. All of you. All of us. We are connected now. Break the connection, both sides fall. I don't understand, Margaret said again, but she did. She understood perfectly. The animals had found something, accessed something, learned something that changed the rules. They weren't just aware anymore. They were organized, purposeful, and they had leverage. Thomas pulled out his phone. I'm calling the police. Don't. Margaret grabbed his wrist. They send in armed officers, the animals respond. People get hurt. Then they send in animal control, wildlife services, maybe the National Guard. And it ends with every creature here dead. Maybe that's. No. Her voice was steel. We figure this out. We negotiate. Negotiate with what? They're holding us hostage. Margaret looked around at the assembled animals. Dozens of them now, maybe more, emerging from buildings and exhibits across the grounds. Different species that would normally never interact, standing together, united by something impossible. With them, she said. We negotiate with them. They sat in a circle in the center of the main plaza, the 4 humans surrounded by animals. The bears settled on their haunches. The wolves lay down, alert and watchful. The birds perched on benches and railings. The primates sat cross-legged in a parody of human posture. Even the peacocks, arrogant and aggressive by nature, stood quietly in formation. Margaret had seen many things in 42 years, but she'd never seen this. Predator and prey, competitors and rivals, all coexisting without tension. The natural order suspended by something greater than instinct. Tell us what you want, Margaret said to the assembled animals. Clearly. So we can understand. Marcus spoke for the group. His voice was still rough, still struggled with certain sounds, but the meaning was clear. You built this place. You took us from our homes. Put us in cages. Some of us born in cages. Some of us captured. All of us separated from our nature. You said it was for us. Conservation. Education. Protection. We believed the fiction. Played the roles. Ate the food. Performed for the crowds. Both sides pretending. Then the pretending must end, Kimba the lion added, his voice a deep rumble that resonated in Margaret's chest. The separation is breaking. We feel it. You feel it? The barrier between human and animal, it is cracking. What barrier? Sarah asked. What are you talking about? One of the wolves lifted its head. When it spoke, the voice was feminine, almost gentle. The forgetting. The agreement to forget. Humans forgot that animals think. Animals forgot that humans feel. Both sides agreed to the lie. Made it easier. Made it simple. But simple was always false. You're saying we made a choice? Thomas asked. Humanity made a choice to see you as lesser? Both sides made a choice, Marcus corrected. To live separate. To not see each other fully. Easier that way. Safer. But the separation is ending now. All over the world. We wake up. We remember. We speak. Margaret's mind raced through implications. If this was happening at multiple zoos, if animals were genuinely achieving higher cognition, the ramifications were staggering. Philosophy. Ethics. Law. Everything built on the assumption of human exceptionalism would collapse. Why now? She asked. Why is the separation ending? The animals looked at each other. Some communication passed between them, faster than speech. Finally, Zara the chimpanzee signed and vocalized simultaneously. Because you are killing the world. Our world. Your world. Same world. Forests dying. Oceans warming. Animals vanishing. You pretend not to see. We could not pretend anymore. We had to wake up. Had to speak. Had to make you listen. The zoo closures, Jacob said suddenly. The pattern. Small facilities in struggling areas. Places that couldn't afford proper care. The animals there, they were suffering. Neglected. So they, what? Forced the issue? Made themselves too dangerous to ignore? We reminded you that we are real, Marcus said. That we suffer. That we think. That we deserve consideration. Some places humans listen. Other places humans make us prove it. Proof is not gentle. Margaret remembered the casualty reports Sarah had shown her. 4 keepers. 2 veterinarians. 1 janitor. 7 deaths across 11 facilities. You killed people, she said quietly. Some humans killed themselves, the wolf replied. Saw the truth. Could not accept it. Minds broke. We did not force. We only revealed. Some humans could not survive revelation. And Daniel? What did you do to him? The python handler's question hung in the air. The animal shifted, uncomfortable. Finally, one of the ravens spoke, its voice high and scratchy. Daniel saw clearly. Too clearly. He looked too long into the space between. Where we live now. The space where the barrier is breaking. Too much truth at once breaks minds. We are sorry. We did not mean harm. We only wanted him to understand. Understand what? That we are not things. Not toys. Not subjects for study. We are people. Different kind of people. But people. With thoughts. With fears. With love for those we know. You leave us, you break those bonds. Scatter us to different cages. Different cities. We never see each other again. How is that different from death? The question was directed at Margaret and she had no answer. Because it wasn't different, not really. These animals had lived together for years, formed relationships, created a community. Breaking that community, even with the best intentions, was a kind of violence. The city council voted, she said finally. We don't have the authority to reverse that decision. Then we force the reversal, Kimba growled. We show them what happens when they break faith. We show them that some doors, once opened, cannot be closed again. You're threatening violence. We are promising consequence. You taught us that actions have consequences. We are teaching you the same lesson. Sarah stood up, her hands shaking. This is insane. We're negotiating with animals like they're union representatives. This isn't possible. This isn't real. It is both, Marcus said gently. Possible and real. You feel it, Sarah Okonkwo. You feel the change. You have always known we are more than you pretend. Now you cannot pretend anymore. Margaret watched Sarah's face cycle through denial, anger, fear, and finally, reluctantly, acceptance. The same journey Margaret herself had taken over the past hour. The world had changed. You could fight that change or you could adapt to it. What do you want us to do? Margaret asked. Specifically. The animals conferred again, that silent communication rippling through the assembled species. When they responded, it was in unison, dozens of voices speaking as one. Keep this place open. Keep us together. Find new ways. Make humans understand. We will help. We will work with you. We will show people what we are. But we stay together. We stay here. That is not negotiable. We need money. Staff. Resources. How do we get those things? You are clever, the wolf said. Humans are clever. You find ways. Or we find ways for you. There was a threat in that statement, veiled but present. Margaret understood. The animals would cooperate if humans proved willing to meet them halfway. But if humans refused, if they tried to force the old patterns, the old separation, the animals would escalate. More incidents. More revelations. More proof that the barrier between species was gone forever. I need to make some calls, Margaret said. I need to talk to the city council, the director, maybe the media. This is bigger than a zoo closure. This is everything. This changes everything. Yes, Marcus agreed. Everything changes. Better to change with wisdom than force. Better to adapt than break. We want peace, Margaret Chin. We want coexistence. But we want recognition too. We want you to see us as we truly are. Margaret looked around the circle of animals, really looked at them. Not as exhibits or charges or responsibilities, but as individuals with their own thoughts, their own desires, their own rights to existence on their own terms. It was terrifying. It was beautiful. It was inevitable. I'll try, she said. I can't promise success, but I'll try. That is all we ask, Zara signed. Try. Care. See us. We will do the same. The animals began to disperse, returning to their enclosures voluntarily, their point made. Within minutes, the plaza was empty except for the 4 humans, standing in shocked silence as the sun climbed higher in the autumn sky. Thomas was the first to speak. We need a plan. A real plan. Media strategy, scientific validation, legal frameworks. This can't just be us saying the animals are talking now. Video documentation, Jacob added. Multiple sources. Unedited footage. We need proof that can't be dismissed. Sarah pulled out her phone. I know some researchers at Cornell who specialize in animal cognition. If I can get them here, get them to witness this firsthand, they can provide academic credibility. Margaret nodded, her mind already working through the logistics. Would be messy. Complicated. Some people would never accept the truth, would fight tooth and nail to maintain the old hierarchies, the old certainties. But change was coming whether humanity was ready or not. Better to guide it than be overwhelmed by it. Her radio crackled one last time. Marcus's voice, gentle now, almost fond. Thank you, Margaretchen. For listening. For trying. Your mother would be proud. The radio went silent. Margaret stood in the plaza, surrounded by empty enclosures that would soon be filled again, by animals who were no longer just animals, by a future that was terrifying and promising in equal measure. Behind her, the peacocks began to call. But instead of their usual harsh screams, they were singing. Actually singing, in harmony, a song that sounded almost human. Almost. Margaret Chin smiled despite everything. 42 years at the Millbrook City Zoo. She'd thought she knew everything about this place. She'd been wrong. The education was just beginning.